What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Park Lane Podcast. Well, with myself, Luke. Unfortunately, we've had a few dropouts this week, just like Spurs. We're inconsistent, but what is consistent is our form in Europe and also my presence on this podcast. So let's get into it today and let's talk about all the things that have happened this week in Spurs. Obviously, we've got to talk about today's 2-0 defeat to Crystal Palace, but the one thing we do have to talk about is that Spurs are on their way to Bilbao. What a time to be alive. Spurs are in another European final, this time the Europa League final. Hopefully, this time, won't be marred by a ridiculous penalty decision in the first 5 minutes. But, only time will tell. Spurs will face Manchester United in the Europa League final. And I'm excited. I'm very excited for this. We are going to talk next week. We'll do a full show previewing the Europa League final. We'll talk about, all of our thoughts, score predictions. We'll go into it in a lot of detail. Myself, we've beaten Manchester United 3 times this season, right? That's all I'm saying. Let's chat to some people in the chat. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well. But also, if you are in watching, make sure you get your comments in the chat, and we'll read out as many as we can. Jay has said, "Good evening. Come on, you Spurs. Spurs are in a final. Such a class game to watch." And then we have Kavinsky Nightglower says that was a riveting game. Well, you've joined it at the right time. Let's get that. Where's his mama said, wow, 3 hours of my life I will never get back watching that shower of shite at the Lane. Let's talk about that game, very, very, very briefly, because to be honest with you, I really don't want to discuss it either. And as it wasn't on Sky Sports, I had to watch it on some kind of Turkish channel, so I didn't even get to hear what the commentators were saying. Today was one of those games that really mattered. Nothing really mattered, but it also was a really important game at the same time because, look, Ange made 9 changes to the starting lineup today, which was expected, obviously. But the issue is that when you make rotations and you have a rotated squad, is that one of the things that you want to happen is that the other players in your squad, stand up, be counted and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, the issue with our second string side is that nobody seems to do that. I mean, Kinski, I thought, had a pretty good game, made some pretty good stops. But I mean, they had 2 goals minimum disallowed, could have been 4-0. So, there are some positives, but there's a lot of negatives as well. Exactly. We've got a comment here saying no passion, no desire. Kavinsky Nightgo said the one positive is that Son is back, so at least we have an experienced player ready for the final up front. And that's a really interesting one because that's probably the only position. I tweeted this week saying that's probably the only position in this team where we have debate over who's going to play. It's either going to be Richie, Tell, or Son. Personally, I think it will be Heung-min Son. I think Ange would rather go with him. I think you get inconsistencies out of all 3 of them, and there really isn't one of them that you would pick and say, that's a starting, that's a starting player in this final. I mean, you probably would want to go with Heung-min Son based on the fact that, his age and experience and so on. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, actually. Let me know in the comments who your front 3 would be for the Europa League final. I'm interested to know. Did you see the fans leaving in the 80th minute? Yeah. Look, I think when you're 2-0 down in the 80th minute and you've played so badly, I'm not surprised people were leaving. But it's a really tricky situation because, as I said, you want to support the team and you want to rest players because you don't want to get injuries, but then you also want your players that are playing to turn up. And I think today that nobody turned up, and that's the major issue for Spurs. It's so inconsistent in terms of who's going to show up on a weekly basis when Ange rotates the squad. Our Premier League form is so bad, like so bad. Yet our European form is sensational. 2 away clean sheets in a row. against two, different teams, but one being a difficult place to play, as we discussed last week, at Bodo Glimt, and the other one being Frankfurt. But to have two clean sheets away from home is a brilliant thing to happen, and yet we can see 2 goals and don't score at home in our penultimate home game of the season. So I get that the players are going to be more interested in that final, but you have to treat every game like it's a final when it's at this stage, because we may get a key injury to somebody, like Kulusevski went off today, and if he goes off, somebody has to come in. We've got no Madison, we've got no Bergvall, and so there has to be a player in there that's able to step up. And so when that doesn't happen, it's a bit frustrating, really. And I'd like to know kind of you guys' thoughts in the chat, and we'll see. So Kaminski Nightgirl said we've got to play our senior players in the final to have some sort of presence. I'd start Son, Richarlison, and Solanke up front. That's interesting. It's a definite. So would you play Son left, Richarlison right, and Solanke up front? I'm interested on that. And then bring on Tell and Odebear for the last 20 minutes if needed for a bit of pace. Kulu just looks awful, and he could be exiting in the summer. Yeah, he's a really interesting one, I think, Kulusevski, because I agree with you. I think he's been really bad. I think first half of the season, I thought he was brilliant. Last season, I thought he was brilliant. But for some reason, ever since he got this injury, I don't know if he's still got a niggling injury or what it might be, but he's just not up to scratch. His touch doesn't look great. I just think that he just looks lost in most games that he plays. And so really, really interesting to see what happens with Kulusevski, because, I would say that he would have been like number one name on the team sheet. And then now you're looking at the likes of Bentancur, Bissouma, are players who are automatically on the team sheet, and players like Kulusevski you could quite easily drop if it weren't for injuries. This is a really interesting one from Ronnie. So Ronnie said we're going to end up 17th with 22 league defeats. Sorry, it's a disgrace. Now, one of my concerns over this is that if you just look at stats, you could say that Brennan Johnson is a world-class player because he's our leading goal scorer and scored, had a decent amount of goals and assists, but he's also trash at 90% of the rest of the stuff he does. So that bit, yes, we're going to end up with a lot of league defeats. It is embarrassing. We are going to finish probably 17th. Embarrassing. But let's be honest, last weekend's game was a write-off. The next 2 games, 3 games, 2 games after today, including today, 3 games are going to be a write-off as well, because everything is going on this Europa League final. If we don't win the Europa League, this season has been a disaster. But this is what is interesting, and one thing I really wanted to discuss. And I want because there's a few people in the chat. So first of all, everybody click the like button, but also I want to hear from everybody in the chat. And if Spurs finish 17th but win their first major European trophy for 40 years, is that a good season for Spurs? I just want like yes or no's in the chat. Like, just let me know. And I'll tell you my thoughts in a minute, because all we want as fans is trophies, right? That's what everybody craves. That's what everybody dislikes the owners for, is trophies. But we go and win a European trophy, and people will say that it's not been a good season. But yet we haven't won a European trophy for 40 years. We haven't won any trophies for over 18 years. So that's the really tricky part of this season, is that, yes, you need to have consistency in multiple fronts. But if we didn't win the Europa League and we finished 4th in the league, everybody would slate Spurs. Everybody would say the owners only want us to finish 4th. They don't want us to win a trophy. So to now sit here, if we do go on and win the Europa League and say that it's not been a good season, to me is contradicting anything that we want as a fan base. Because nothing will ever be good enough And I get it. The league form does need to change. I do get it, right? 17th with 22 league defeats is embarrassing. But to go and win a trophy that we haven't won in 40 years, and Postecoglou to only be the third manager ever to win a European trophy at Spurs, I don't know. I don't think you can criticise that too much. But we've got Eva Blog said no, Ronnie said no. So people aren't happy with the season regardless, as if we win the Europa League. And Kavinsky said our fourth European Cup would be amazing, and the manager has to get another chance if he brings home the silverware. Ronnie said no, sorry, he has to go even if we win the final. There's a whole debate going on here. Levy needs to sign proper top quality players for Ange. The amount of games we've lost by 1 goal is due to the lack of quality in the squad. That's a really interesting fact. But again, that's something that certain fans don't want to hear. That we've only lost. I think it's something crazy like 14 or 13 of the losses we've had this season have only been by 1 goal. So it does say a lot. Maybe we are lacking the quality that we need. David Clark jumped in and said, sorry, this game proved to every Spurs fan who aren't blinded by the Europa League Cup final, because today proved that Ange Ball is a complete farce and hasn't got the mental capacity to realise it. Very, very interesting, David. I'm intrigued. I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and I'm trying to go along with it because I do understand. But I think that today looked like we have. Here we go. Stephen McGrath said today we look like we've got 11 strangers having a kickabout. But then we did make 9 changes from our on starting 11. Substitute goalkeeper was playing in goal. It was a game whereby these players know they're probably not going to play in the final, and so they weren't interested. But it just proves that there is something wrong at Spurs, because the mentality should be, and we all watched social media. We all saw that clip of Ange Postecoglou and his speech in the dressing room after the semi-final win. If that doesn't motivate anybody, then I don't know what will. And that's my issue: is that these players, every single one of them today, should have been giving everything to try and maybe snatch a place in the final squad, or in the starting 11 for the final. If it was me, I'd be doing everything I could, because there are certain players who are injured. There may be injuries coming up, and you need to be ready if you're called upon. But as people are saying, the problem at Spurs starts at the top. It does, and I don't deny that. But I am still intrigued by those fans who still don't think we've had a good season if we win the Europa League. But that's a different debate, which we were going to have, but unfortunately, I was the only one that was available tonight. And we've had a comment here saying at least Gray and Moore got more minutes under their belt. Yeah, I thought Gray was poor in parts today, but again, he's played 4 different positions potentially this season. Left back, right back, centre back, and centre midfield. So he's bound to be kind of bound to be out of it. But Mikey Moore, again, like he's just somebody that's just going to have to be eased in. It's not just going to be thrown into every game. I wouldn't be surprised if on Friday night he doesn't get a game against Aston Villa. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if we lose that game. But it is really weird, though, isn't it? Our form, our form going into the Europa League, because our Premier League form is so bad, but our Europa League form is pretty decent, I would say. The campaign's not been unbelievable, from start to finish. There's been some losses that we probably shouldn't have had. But the last 2 games, the last 2 away games, not conceding the goal, I felt like we looked so solid on Thursday night. And we'll discuss that in a minute. So, I would be absolutely over the moon if we win the Europa League. And I think that thank you, Johnny, for the subscribe. I think that would say that Spurs have had an unbelievable season. Honestly, I think if we win the Europa League, you can't deny that winning that trophy is an unbelievable success in my eyes. Right, let's get back to some comments. So Phil Lip said, "Yep, we're going to Bilbao to lose." Oh dear. Now, do you know what, Phil? I'm not going to brandish you as kind of the problem with our fan base, but I mean that is a problem, isn't it? If you're already suggesting that we're going to lose a cup final, no wonder our players have no killer instincts. If this is what some of our fans are like, that's the major issue, isn't it? We have to be confident and we have to go in, with the form we've had in Europe, that we're going to get something out of this. We've beaten United 3 times this season. There is no reason why we can't beat them again. This whole hoodoo of like, oh, we've beaten 3 times, so it's likely that this time we'll probably lose, is again just ways to like protect ourselves from losing. But we have to go in with confidence and we have to go in suggesting that we can win this game. Right, let's get through some more comments. PG Spurs said unpopular opinion, but I don't like the attitude from Mikey Moore, and not just him, a lot of our players. That's crazy. Like, I don't think I've ever seen it. Maybe there's like, is it like a cockiness or what is it that you don't like? I'm quite intrigued to know kind of what it is that you don't like. Right, David Clark said that's because Thursday night was the complete opposite of Ange. You have to wake up to that or be forever a happy clapper. Yeah, but there's no such thing, mate, as like, oh, well, Ange Postecoglou only plays one way of football, so that's the only way he can play. And if he plays a little bit further forward or a little bit long ball football, then that's not Ange ball, and therefore it's not him, being a successful manager. Like, all we've asked for as fans is that he can adapt and change as a manager to make us not lose so many games. He adapts and changes, and you're not happy because it's not Ange ball and it's different. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that's the way that we have it. Ono Permo has said, the players are at fault today, not Ange. Oh god, the comments are just flying in here. 2 secs. Anyway, I don't really understand this comment, so we'll just move on. So let's talk about Thursday night because that's probably the reason why we're all here and kind of the one thing that we want to discuss today, and that was obviously our 2-1 or 2-0, sorry, victory away at Bodo Glimt in the Europa League semi-final second leg, meaning that we end up running out 5-1 winners in that tie. And I don't think as a two-legged tie, it could have gone much better, personally. Fair play to all the 400 odd supporters that were there, because I was reading some stuff on social media and watching some videos on TikTok, and it was absolutely insane. That not just the distance you have to travel, but also the fact that someone said they paid like £45 to get to Oslo, and then the flight from Oslo to Bodo was like £350 or something, and it's like such a short flight. It's just crazy that fans have gone to this length, to watch Spurs. And so I thought they were brilliant. I thought they made a good amount of noise for such a small amount of fans. So fair play to every single person that went. If you did go and you are in the chat, then let us know. But what was also unreal on Thursday night, or so good on Thursday night, is that there was no issues with the pitch, as in terms of the players didn't try and blame the pitch for anything. The players, were solid. I think I've never seen us as solid at the back as we were on Thursday. And, we were clinical when we needed to be. And those that doubt Dominic Solanke is a top quality Premier League striker need their head wobbling, because, again, it just proves that he doesn't have to only be able to play and hold the ball up and be a kind of target man, but he can also be a poacher in the box. And regardless of what you think about Christian Romero and how he acts sometimes, the winning mentality that guy has, especially as a centre back, and he was captain on Thursday night, I thought was absolutely brilliant and outstanding. I felt like on Thursday night he was again probably at his very, very best, and I'm hoping that that's kind of where he where he ends up in terms of a Europa League final is where he will show up and show his best side. The one thing we don't want is to see that kind of that side where he gets too angry and too lashes out a little bit too much. So I want to know your thoughts about Thursday night. What did you think of the semi-final? Were you happy that Ange adapted his tactics? We'll go to David Clark in a minute. Were you happy with the way we let them have the ball? I thought it was weird though that they play on this plastic pitch, and yet there was times when it was cutting up all over the place, and I was shocked by kind of how poor it was in sections. But overall, I think it was an absolutely brilliant night. So David Clark said he has only adapted in Europe, not in the Premier League. All squad players should have got a huge lift from getting to the final, but even the bench players will be on the bench. Who will be on the bench showed nothing today. I agree. I completely agree. It is an interesting one that he hasn't adapted in the Premier League, but the other, I don't know whether the other option is that, like, to keep it fresh so that both tactics are in in the players' minds. I don't know. I don't know why he hasn't adapted in the Premier League, because we discussed this actually on the show a few weeks ago after the Frankfurt game and before, I think it was before the Liverpool game. And we said, look, I said, if he continues to adapt and play this tactic, then we could get something out of that game. Or if he just immediately changes back to, what he's done before, it could be an issue. And so I'm not really sure why he's done that, because it's very likely in the Europa League final we'll go back to playing long balls up to Dominic Solanke, knockdowns, winning the balls up, winning balls on the kind of kind of second touch and trying to win the ball high up on the pitch and go from there. So it's a really interesting one. I'd like to hear, David, if you've got any thoughts on why he hasn't adapted in the Premier League, but he has adapted in Europe. Right, PG Spurs has said Spurs should start with the basics. Oh, for God's sake, man. This is... Do you know what? We're not even going to read this out. Move on. So Kavinsky United said if Bruno could shut down, if Basuma could shut down Bruno Fernandes, we might have a chance against United. Look, United aren't the United of old. I think that's the one thing that we need to remember, is that gone are the days whereby Manchester United won everything, and Manchester United were the best team. Sorry, excuse me for this. Just put my blind down so you can all see me. Manchester United were winning the Premier League year after year. This is a very, very, very poor United squad. It's a very, very poor United squad with a mentality. And just because they are Manchester United, people all automatically assume that they have the right mentality to win big trophies. But it's been a long time since they've really won anything massive. I mean, you can talk about obviously the FA Cup last season and whatnot, but I think that Bissouma will have will have to have a big night to be able to shut down someone like Bruno Fernandes. But I think that he's shown in the last few weeks that he's got the right mentality, and he looks like he's the Bissouma of the player that we should have signed and we should have had from the very beginning, to be honest. But yeah. Right, I'm going to try and jump to... David Clark's come back. Because Thursday was a million miles away from what Ange believed in, out of his own mouth, he said that he will change for nobody, so he's a liar because he did. Do you know what, David? I'm going to say this just to you right now. I don't really understand why you support a football club and then hate on anything that happens that isn't something that you like. So, for example, if people don't like James Maddison, or, for example, you don't like Ange Postecoglou, so now he's a liar, and so on. I mean, people are allowed to change, and people are allowed to adapt. And maybe he's realised that managing at an elite level, you're gonna have to adapt, because otherwise he's gonna be out of a job. But I will not move from this statement, and that is, if he wins the Europa League, he instantly becomes a legend of this football club. And I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what anybody says on this subject. He will be the third manager, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the third manager ever to win a European trophy at Tottenham Hotspur. Therefore, he will automatically become a legend in my eyes, because there's only ever been two other people that have done that. You can talk about other cups and so on, and you can talk about being 17th in the league. But if we talk about managers that come in and that win close to the ultimate prize with a football club, something that we haven't had for 40 years, I don't think you can call him anything else personally. Maddison is crucial to our forward line, so he's a huge miss, which is why I suggested that Basuma plus Bentancur need to shut down Man United's midfield. Yeah, you're probably right, because Maddison likes to come deep, and kind of roam around and pick the ball up and move forward with the ball. Kulusevski, who likely will play there unless he's injured, isn't the same type of player. And so I think Maddison is a massive miss. I've been up and down on James Maddison, but in Europe he's been sensational the last few games. And so, especially the first game against Bodo Glimt, it showed that he really wanted to work hard, and he really wanted to, for us to get to that final. So he will be a massive miss. And I think that, Bentancur and Basuma have both stepped up at the right time in the season. So they'll definitely need to be on their game to shut down that United midfield, really. Let's have a little look, see what else is going on today. Jay, I think Eze from Palace would be a good signing. Yeah, he's one of those players that interest me because, we have got James Maddison, right? So he would play in that similar position. He seems like a player that once things are going well, he plays well. My issue with him is like, does he have that like winner's mentality that we all say we need? Does he have that mentality that's like, whatever happens, I'm going to make it happen? He seems like somebody who, and we've got enough of this type of player, I think, already, whereby if things are going well, he's unbelievable. If things aren't going well, is he going to like, bite his tongue and just crack on and make it happen? That's the only issue that I'm not sure on. It's not about hating somebody. It's about calling a man out who blatantly is pursuing forward a statement for everybody to hear that he will not be swayed from his beliefs, but plainly he has. I mean, everybody's allowed to change, right? I don't ever remember in the last 3 or 4 months hearing him say that he wouldn't change personally. But I might be wrong. I might be wrong on that. Levy needs to surround Maddison with top quality players, but he signed average players as per usual. Yeah, I think this is an interesting debate, actually. So let me know, guys, in the chat, who or where you think are our key positions to sign in the summer. What position do we need to strengthen in? Because I would have said left back, or I did say left back at the start of the season. I think that potentially we still need a left back, but it's not essential. I think that Spence can play there. I'm kind of losing faith sometimes on Jed Spence, because there's games where he plays unbelievable, like against Liverpool at home in the cup, and then there's other times where he's not so good. So that's potentially an issue that we could work on. I think like right and left would. Oh, thank you, Wesley, for the like. Yeah, I think right and left wing probably are crucial, but also a second attacking midfielder as well. I think Spurs really need. Do I see us in the summer signing like the players that we require there? I think left wing is probably the most essential. Again, someone like Odegaard, on the right, or can play on the left. I think again he needs time. There's been glimpses this season where he showed that he's how good he is, but I'm not so sure about him kind of, going forward. Like, do we need somebody who's ready-made that can come in and do it? But again, we go on to the Brennan Johnson debate, and that is he is still our leading goal scorer in all competitions, and so he should be good enough to play there. But for me, it's the other parts of his game that can be frustrating. So definitely interesting. I would like to know your thoughts. Like, where are the positions that you would like us to strengthen, and what's some realistic targets that you guys want to see? We've had Jay that said Eze already. There's some really interesting players that we were looking at before that have gone places. For example, Doué that ended up at PSG. He looks unbelievable. Everybody knows my thoughts on Matthias Tell, so I'm not going to get involved in that. I mean, it may be that Spurs try and sign him. I don't know if he's the quality that we require. I mean, he's young, but half of the problem with our fan base is that we keep signing young players and we need some ready-made players. So I think 50, 60 million pounds that he's going to cost would be better spent, on somebody who can come in and make a change. I mean, look at Arsenal, right? We don't tend to talk about them a lot, but they go out of the Champions League semi-final. They realise they need another midfielder to come in and play with the likes of Rice and other players like that, and they go out and get Zubimendi, who's been highly touted by the likes of Liverpool as well. So to come in and do that, I think shows that they mean business next season. I'm not saying they will do anything, but that's kind of what we need as a fan base. We need that from our owners, and it is difficult. I get it. It's difficult to cope, with the fact that we always tend to wait a little bit too long. We never tend to get the players that we require early, and that's what I would like to see. But we need to get it right with the manager, don't we? If they're not going to back the manager, then they need to get a manager they are going to back, or they need to walk away, which is probably the more likely or needed scenario at this stage. Right, what have we got here? So David Clark has said the inverted fullbacks. Oh, we're still talking about James Maddison. Right, okay, hold on. The inverted fullbacks, Atlas left-sided front men, the likes of Sarr. None of these players allow Maddison to fulfill his potential. No, look, fair enough. I think that you can't blame other people on somebody. Maddison himself has to be big enough and ugly enough to step up and do what he wants and to make things happen. He's good enough to do that. And we saw it in the first leg against Bodo Glimt. I think that when he's on it, what I just described about Eze is exactly Maddison, and that's why I don't think that spending the money on Eze is worthwhile. Personally, I would rather we got a powerhouse midfield and some decent wingers, and we go from there. But again, it will depend on who's in the dugout next season. If they do sack Ange Postecoglou after the Europa League final, and do you know what? This is not something that's been talked about a lot, but don't be surprised if he walks away at the end of that as well. The way that he's been treated to come in and win a trophy and then just walk away would not surprise me at all. He'd lose a lot of money, so that's the only negative behind it, due to obviously the fact he's still got a year left on his contract. But who do we bring in, and at what point do we bring them in, and are we bringing them in, allowing them to make signings? That's where the season could be a write-off before it's already began. And so that's why I can understand the idea of allowing Ange to have another season, to do that, right? How long you think we can keep Bergvall? He just signed a long contract. So, as long as we want, really, unless someone comes in and pays the money. It's as simple as that, isn't it? Players can, want to leave and players can have their heads turned. But unless a club is going to come and pay the money that we want for him, and I would suspect with Daniel Levy that would be a hell of a lot of money, then we can keep hold of him as long as we want. A manager that would be really good for someone like that would be Mauricio Pochettino. And those that kind of watch the show and read me on. There's no buyout clause, is there? There's no buyout clause as far as I'm aware for Bergvall, unless I'm mistaken. I haven't seen anything regarding that, but I could be wrong. I'm wrong about a lot of things. So yeah, those that know, follow me on social media know that I have a theory about Poch, and that is that they keep, or Spurs in general, that they keep Ange for one more season after the World Cup in 26. Ange is out of contract. Pochettino will be easier to grab from the US national team after they crash out early doors, and then we go out and and get Pochettino at that point. That's my theory on what happens. But due to how bad the league has been, I also wouldn't be surprised if Ange walks due to how the fans and media have treated him, or B, Daniel Levy sacks him anyway after he wins. I mean, if he doesn't win the Europa League final, he's sacked regardless. Like I think there's no other. I would be very, very, very shocked if he if he if he doesn't win the Europa League and he doesn't get sacked, to be fair. But that's where we're sitting on this. I said 1 minute ago or 5 minutes ago that if he wins the Europa League, he becomes a club legend. If he doesn't win the Europa League, then he's just another manager that failed at Spurs. It's that kind of far along in the process. And so, look, only time will tell. Right, let's talk about can we keep Postecoglou and add Poch, creating a Postachino era? Oh, who knows? What an unbelievable pairing that would be, having Ange Postecoglou and Mauricio Pochettino. Who's the assistant in that? What we saying? Ange's Poch's assistant, Poch's Ange's assistant. Do they just do it together, a bit like Newcastle? Who knows? Interesting. The Postachino. I love that. Right, let's talk about Friday night's game then against Aston Villa. Look, another game where Spurs will just rest players and have players kind of wrapped in cotton wool. I think we'll see some minutes from certain players, like we may see 45 minutes from like Romero or Van der Ven, because Ange did say after the Bodo Glimt game that he wasn't really going to risk them, in this game due to how likely they were to potentially pick up injuries based on the plastic pitch and how much it takes out of their bodies and so on. So it's likely that they will feature at some point because they will need some fitness before the Europa League final. But I would also see probably 45 minutes from players like that. I would expect to see again 45 minutes from Heung-min Son. And I probably suspect we will lose because everything is on the Europa League. But, can Spurs get something out of this game? Potentially. Can they kind of put a damper on Aston Villa's European hopes or Champions League hopes? Quite possibly. Only time will tell. I mean, we haven't got any score predictions from the guys, so let me know in the chat what your score predictions are, and also your thoughts on Villa on Friday night. I mean, am I wrong, or are most people now just thinking about Wednesday the 21st and the Europa League final? Because I am. Right. Let's have a little look. So Jay said it'll be out of Poch or Glasner. Thomas Frank won't leave. Neither will Ariola or Marco Silva. Yeah, it is interesting that, and I think if you go with the Glasner, he's probably got more reputation and more to him for me than the likes of a Thomas Frank or an Ariola or Marco Silva, just because of his Europa League success and also his domination of constantly finishing in European positions with Frankfurt pretty much every season that he was there. But I just don't know how much better he is than Postecoglou personally. But people will absolutely kill me for this. Let's chat about the the Crystal Palace game today. I mean, I won't go through it too much, but these were the score predictions. So I had 3-1 Spurs win. Winnie and Callum had the wheel, so they had 5-4 Spurs and 5-3 Spurs respectively. Dave went 2-1 Spurs, and Wales went for a 1-1 draw. No one gets any points whatsoever, so it does nothing to the score predicted table, which sits with 2 games to go. Winnie on 19, Dave on 19, Wes on 6, Callum on 9, and me on 8. It's mathematically impossible for me to finish anywhere apart from 4th. So we will just see what happens and hope for the best. I mean, I'm going to lose the crown, aren't I? But we'll see out of those 3 who does win or get the crown back. Right, let's bring up the wheel as well so we can get some score predictions in for the lads. Keep your score predictions coming in, please, for David Clark's had an absolute meltdown in the chat, but I'll leave it for now. Let's do score predictions for Aston Villa. We'll get those over, and then we'll talk to that. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just going through, making sure I can make notes on what all the lads get when the wheel spins in a moment. So it's Friday night, I believe, 7:45, which was decent of them to change the game, because obviously it's important that we get the same amount of rest that we need to. 7:30, sorry, on Friday night, away at Villa. So let's go through some of the scores. We've got where's his dad said 1-0 Spurs. Love that. Where's his mum? Just had no faith in Spurs in the Premier League anymore. 3-1 Villa. Jay also has no faith in Spurs. He's gone 3-0 Villa. Let me know if you have any more score predictions in the chat, and we'll go through them. And we'll load up the wheel now and see what the other guys get. I will put my score prediction in first, just to be fair. So everyone that knows me by now knows that I do not predict Spurs to lose. So I'm going to have to go with a draw because I don't see anything else. I'm going to say Desmond. I'll go 2-2 draw. I expect we'll concede. But let's see. Right, let's get the wheel loaded up. Ready? So we'll spin the wheel now for Winnie. So his prediction is as follows. Which is probably as bad as it gets, isn't it, really? Spurs keeping a clean sheet away at Villa Park, apparently. Right. Let's spin the wheel for Dave. Dave's got a 0-0 draw. Very interesting. Seems though that Dave and Winnie are joint top. Winnie's got a Spurs win, and Dave has got a draw. Spin the wheel for Wesley. Let's see what he gets. Oh, he's also got a Desmond, so that's 2-2 for Wes. Honestly Wes's favourite score, so I'm sure we'll be absolutely thrilled with that. And last but not least, let's spin the wheel for Callum. He's also got a 1-0 Spurs win. Very interesting scores, and what does make it really interesting for any of those who actually care, is that as we went through the score predictor table at the moment, Winnie and Dave are both joint level on points. So Winnie's got a Spurs win and Dave has got a draw. But Wes is 3 points behind Dave and Winnie with 2 games to go. And he also has a draw, which means that he can only claim, move towards points on Dave if he gets a correct score. But if he gets 1 point for the draw, then him and Dave can move closer to winning. So very interesting in the table that nobody else cares about apart from us. So interesting times. Look, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Kind of wasn't a normal show, obviously just me, but the chat has been brilliant, and everyone that's got their comments in has been absolutely great. Next week or next weekend, we're doing a show solely focused on the Europa League final and previewing and preparing for Wednesday night's Europa League final, the 21st of May, and we'll be discussing everything there is about that game. So come join us next week. That's next Sunday, 7 p.m. 7 p.m. every Sunday. If you don't remember, and if you do want to follow me, you can follow me Luke_Park Lane on Twitter. But more importantly, it's Park Lane Podcast or Park Lane Pod on any social media platform that you can find. We will be there. There will be clips, there will be videos, there will be lots of stuff. So interact with us, chat to us, drop us DMs, and we'll always try and respond to you. Want to thank every single person that's tuned in today, especially for Wes's mum, who said thank you for the therapy. Well, been very, very much appreciated. Jay has said, great show, Luke. Smashed it with being on your own. Thank you very much, Jay. Thank thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a lovely rest of your week, or the upcoming week, and we'll see you next Sunday, 7 p.m. And let's hope that Spurs, in a couple of weeks' time, can bring it home in Europe. So until then, a massive come on, you Spurs. Tottenham!